What is up, everybody? It is Ben from the Mafia Members Podcast. We are joined today by Blake, Allen, Murphy doing a week one preview show. So we'll jump right into it.
The Mafia Members Podcast.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
Alrighty, everyone. So, like I said, we are joined by Blake Murphy, Redbird Reboot Podcast. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, where we can find you, and what you do, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I used to write for SB Nation for a couple, actually, I better say a couple, I mean almost a decade or so. Kind of went off on my own, starting the Redbird Reboot podcast, which is a lot of fun, being able to break down film, go over the team just from a Cardinals perspective. It's always fun to see team fans who know their teams and are experts be able to go back and forth. And the Twitter ad, of course, is there at Blake Murphy 7. I have to say, I used to be the second most followed Blake Murphy, I think, in sports Twitter, behind the one who writes for the Toronto Raptors. So some of you Buffalo fans who maybe have some Toronto crossover or background. But now there's another quarterback who wears number 7, whose name is Blake Murphy. And that, of course, means that I just keep falling down these Blake Murphy depth charts, at least unfortunately. So that's just one thing I can say with my off season is it never gets old. But at some point, maybe we'll see if we can bump back up there.
You notice some extra followers maybe by mistake with the name?
No, I did get one time a question that someone asked me about Toronto Raptors basketball, and I think it was vice versa, where someone else went to the other Blake Murphy and was like, "I think the Cardinals are gonna be signing this player," and he's like, "Brother, I'm in Canada. Like, we have a whole different football league than we were looking for."
Well, as a Canadian, I do follow the Raptors quite closely, so I was familiar with the name for sure.
Oh yeah, no, it's always fun, at least when you get some of that crossover. I know a lot of Raptors fans. It'll be interesting to see how it goes this year. You know, you got a title. Suns fans in the Phoenix Desert are, I think, the most winningest sports franchise without a Super Bowl as far as for amount of time they've operated. It's one of those cases that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, since I know that the Bills, they're definitely one of the teams that is pushing for a Super Bowl this year, along with a lot of changes. Arizona's been nothing but change the last couple of years.
Yeah. So on that note, we'll jump into it. So you just mentioned a lot of changes. So what like how was your offseason going? How do you think your offseason went, like draft wise, training camp wise? How do you think it went?
Yeah, the Cardinals, I would say, after Kyler Murray's injury and then the new coach took over, we went and saw them in camp and realized very quickly there's a 5th-round rookie quarterback, and instead of throwing the football, Colt McCoy is just pointing at where he would go to. So they basically brought in the starting quarterback via trade with like 1 week before the season started. So the Cardinals fans, this has essentially been one big offseason since the 2022 season is kind of how it's felt like. Last year was not even like a rebuild year. It was like, we're going to have to go into this house. We're going to basically like knock out all the walls, redo the kitchen, put in not just whole new cabinets. We're going to have to basically like take out all the floors. That's really what it has been with taking on a essentially down year, knowing that Kyler Murray, there's a lot of questions. Was he going to come back? Were the Cardinals going to tank for a Caleb Williams? They had essentially one of the highest chances of getting him, and were even with a top 2 NFL draft pick up until the last 2 weeks of the season. Just goes to show you at least that there's a lot that a quarterback can mean to a franchise. Obviously, Bills fans looking at the pre-Josh Allen days, due to where now every year it seems like you're a competitor, that can make a lot of sense. But most of the offseason for Cardinals fans was wanting to see if they could use 2 top 5 picks, one from the Houston Texans that did not go according to that plan. They also wanted to be able to bring in a top number 1 wide receiver to be able to pair with Kyler Murray. They have kind of gone from this strange era of going from an Anquan Bolden to a Larry Fitzgerald to even a DeAndre Hopkins. And once it became clear that Hopkins was not going to be a Cardinal, Cards fans have been looking for the next big thing, and they're expecting a lot of greatness from the likes of Marvin Harrison Jr. And after that, it's been more about just getting bodies in for the defensive side. The offense actually produced well down the stretch, so most Cardinals fans are hoping that this year can be the year that their offense can actually take a big leap. While as on the defensive side, there's more Cardinals hopes and prayers, I think, happening from our fan base than maybe even in some Catholic churches, what I would say. Different type of Cardinal, but the defense at least has not gotten the amount of star quality. Maybe you could argue it's underrated in some places from where it was. I think that most people, however, are expecting that the defense is going to be bad again and that the Cardinals offense may need to do some carrying, because this was an off season and where Arizona just invested heavily, not in free agents, not in spending a lot of dollars or even keeping their own guys, but adding draft capital and at least starting caliber players on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, awesome. That's you said it before. Like the Bills went through like a massive from Jim Kelly to what we have now in Josh Allen, like the Nathan Petermans, EJ Manuels, Trent Edward. Like you always feel like you're just kind of fumbling through from season to season. So it's nice to know that you have at least 2 cornerstone pieces in Kyler and Marvin Harrison, and that you at least know you're going to get something out of. You don't. I'm sure that's where the excitement from Arizona Cardinals fans comes from, is you don't know exactly what that ceiling is going to be like, but you're at least have something to cheer for and look forward to seeing out on the field.
Right. And the other thing, too, that's interesting is that the Cardinals have never been a team that's really had a quality tight end. I think the last time that they did was sometime in the 80s. And one thing that we got to see last year was that Trey McBride really ended up kind of launching himself into the stratosphere, not just in terms of being a top fantasy pick, but there was times when you watch some of the film and put things together, you realize Arizona was pretty depleted at wide receiver for the most part. They had rookies, they had like small slot guys, but their game plan was to run the ball with James Conner and then throw the ball to Trey McBride. And teams knew what their game plan was and were still having issues with being able to stop it without doubling him, which is something that I think a lot of Cardinals fans are excited, because whether it was Cliff Kingsbury's scheme that didn't feature the tight end, or even in previous years where the team had just never invested, being able to find a mismatch, and not only a mismatch, but someone who can do things on a lot of sides of the ball. I know we can talk some about the Bills having a similar type of build with having kind of a strong blocker for the most part, at least in Knox, and then being able to bring in another pass catcher. Arizona's got the same sort of team building strategy that they've used as far as being able to find guys who can do it all. And McBride is probably that third offensive cornerstone, at least, that they're hoping can really be able to be something to look forward to this year, especially since in the NFC West, it's not simple being able to have a nice, easy division to begin for the most part. I know that was something that Patriots at least had for a long time with Belichick, and then Bills fans have just enjoyed the last few years. Oh, everyone else is just going to be kind of done by the playoffs, which is cool. But now with being the NFC West, where you've got multiple Super Bowl champions, it's definitely an uphill battle, and Cardinals fans are hoping that they can get the week 1 off to a good start.
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of saying all off season. Well, since I really started doing this show, was like it almost kind of sucks that the Patriots went from like number 1 for so long to like the bottom so quickly, because
Yeah.
you would have, like, it doesn't feel the same beating them without Tom Brady there. Like you want to build kind of that rivalry. So it's nice for you guys to be like building your team and still getting the San Fran and LA kind of at their best as well. And you can, kind of build a rivalry is a little bit better than just one team being better and then quickly switching over to a different team being just as good.
Right. And then last year was also very unique heading into the offseason. Even the Seahawks, who their defense was depleted, you could see that Pete Carroll was on the way out, but they were still at least pushing for the most part to be able to get a playoff spot late. And the Cardinals should have, by all accounts, won that game at the end of the year. They had 2 missed field goals by their field goal kicker that essentially kind of sunk what should have been and of course their defense was basically the version of a matador, letting the Seahawks go back in and change, but they could have been 4-4 down that stretch with Kyler Murray playing, and by missing those 2 field goal kicks, it kind of locked them into the Marvin Harrison Jr. number 4 spot. So, it's not something that I'm going to complain about too much as far as a Cardinals fan. And you'll have to see. Cardinals fans were thinking that we were going to have a top 5 or at least top 10 pick from the Houston Texans. And with a rookie quarterback like CJ Stroud come out and just blow games up like that with the team being better than expected, you kind of can't count your chickens before you hatch. I feel pretty confident in saying that Drake May and the Patriots won't be a CJ Stroud, but it is definitely something to look at. Is things in the NFL change on a dime. They even change from week to week, where teams will change all of their projections after week 1, and then week 2 happens, and they'll mix everything up all over again because things did not play out how everyone is expected, which is where it's going to be an interesting game to not just gauge how the Cardinals and Bills look, but also be able to say that we may not be able to, winner or loser here, define the entire season just based off of how these teams perform. But that's a huge first step in terms of being able to see what these new look offenses look like, and if their defensive additions and subtractions, especially I think additions in Arizona's side, but not a lot, and subtractions from the Bills, but not as much, end up mattering in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note, what do you think is your biggest area that you improved on over the offseason, and what's the biggest area that still needs a little bit of help?
Yeah, so the Cardinals last year, excuse me, they were by the end of the year a top 10 rushing offense, and they were ranked 32nd in receiving. And part of that was that they let go of DeAndre Hopkins. It was an area where it became very clear that they wanted to essentially take the hit in a down year, let him be able to kind of go and find that one last big contract that he wanted to, and the Titans had a need as well, and that they were also then going to have to bring along a rookie and then see what did they feel like they had in Hollywood Brown. He wasn't able to stay healthy. He's not even healthy for week 1 with the Chiefs, unfortunately. So it was a case where what's the best cure for a team that's 32nd in receiving? And the answer is to take one of the best wide receiver prospects that we've seen in recent years near the top of the draft. I think that by the end of the year, when they were able to get a bit more from Greg Dortch and then seeing Trey McBride, what they were still missing was just that go-to guy on possession downs, and being able to actually have someone who could win some of those one-on-one routes, who wasn't, like a 5'8" undrafted free agent. We love Greg Dortch out here in Phoenix, but he's no Marvin Harrison Jr. The other place too was that the depth that they had some key injuries last year. They lost Kaiser White for the rest of the season, and they had pretty much no linebackers and no defensive linemen by the end of the season. I think there was one time where we saw there was 2 games in a row where their starting defensive tackle was hurt. Arizona signed a guy off of the street to play. He got hurt in that game, and then they signed another defensive tackle. And so you're like, oh, this is why Kyron Williams won people fantasy leagues last year with like 400 rushing yards, came just against the Cardinals. So a lot of Cardinals fans are hoping that the team's been able to beef up a little bit up front by adding a little bit of some depth, at least in the front 7. Doesn't have to be great, but if they can at least be average to below average, the hope is that the offense will at least be more complete. And that's where I think a lot of Cardinals fans are going to be looking, because if there's one team that really showed how to run the ball down the stretch, it was the Buffalo Bills late last year. Everything with James Cook and the new look offense that they had, at least with the new OC, was very impressive.
That game against the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, I think Green Bay almost copied our playbook, like play for play against Dallas in the playoffs. Like that was just kind of, the James Cook coming out party. Us in Bills Mafia, we all already knew what James Cook was capable of. We already knew he was having a great season, but that kind of put him out there, and we just ran it. And a team like that, if you can develop a rushing game, which you guys had with James Conner, you can travel, you can go anywhere with a run first kind of approach, and I think that's what the Bills are. I think that's what the Bills are planning on doing this season.
Yep, it opens up a lot as far as with other weapons and play action using some of the multiple tight ends. Is part of why I think a lot of people have highlighted this as a sleeper game, is that these are teams that have kind of been put together in a similar mold, except one of them is trying to clearly get back to the playoffs, and the other is essentially trying to look at all of these other teams in the AFC that are making moves and get over that Chiefs area. I do say, like, as someone who is at least from a neutral party, I do really like Joe Brady. I've kind of followed from some of the time from LSU and from some of the other places. I think it was really interesting in that he, with the Carolina Panthers, ripped our defense apart in the one game that he did have. What's really unique, though, of course, is now that everyone's looking at the Carolina Panthers, especially in light of last year, and people are going, oh, Joe Brady's doing really well in Buffalo. Maybe we kind of blamed him a little bit harshly considering the conditions in Carolina. A lot of people have pointed out some of that with Arizona as well, and it has been a very good step forward, at least in terms of just getting some guys who are at least able to have a vision for how the team will build with the draft and a vision on the football field, at least, that's probably a little bit easier for players to buy into, especially in terms of just some of those intangibles. That was something that we at least saw with Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim, that they put a lot of time and money and effort in, and then when everything fell apart, they realized they had to kind of tear it down. Fortunately for the Bills, they've at least been in a stable spot and didn't have that Josh Allen ACL that Kyler Murray at least had that really forced them into that hard reset. So that's something I think that's exciting for Bills fans, is that instead of being, like you said, that team that goes in year by year that has all sorts of areas and problems and woes, you're looking forward to this, looking at the Cardinals on the schedule, and Cardinals fans are almost having to tell Bills fans, like, this isn't necessarily a give me game. And at the same time, we're also Cardinals fans going to the East Coast. We can't be overconfident thinking that there's an upset in the works either, given that this team is still a work in progress.
Yeah. So that'll bring us to the week one game. And so my first question, because I said this on my show this week, the Arizona Cardinals are kind of like what the Bills were like 7 years ago, where they're not really in the national media as much, but they're definitely working their way into being like a team that everybody's going to tune in to watch for. So what can the Bills expect from the Cardinals in week one? Like, do you see, like, for me, I see the Bills it's going to be a run first game. You're going to see a lot of James Cook, a lot of Josh Allen runs. So what can the Bills expect from the Cardinals?
Yeah, so as far as the Bills and the Cardinals are how the matchup, I'll kind of go like offense versus defense for the most part. Starting with the Bills offense, the biggest area with Arizona is that they really have operated in a talent deficiency, but not an effort deficiency. So you would see times where they would try different areas or different looks, kind of like one of those spots of, instead of being locked into a system, they would have kind of a lot of creativity that would pop up. I think last year they would try to have a package where all of their best edge rushers or pass rushers would be on the field. They would mix things up at least somewhat in the back end. One of the things that you're going to see a lot from them this year is probably going to be some 3 safety looks. They have Jalen Thompson, Buda Baker, and they drafted Dadrian Taylor Demerson to kind of be at least probably that future safety. Buda Baker's contract is going to be up after this year. He's been a long time Cardinal, kind of a captain of that team. But seeing how they're going to probably utilize it is you'll probably see a lot of those 3 safety looks where they're going to be able to keep a lot of that deep passing game in front of them, while at the same time having at least the ability with that extra safety to move them around to be able to kind of guard against the run, trying to play into the strengths of some of how their team's been built. On their pass rush packages, Arizona was looking forward to their top edge rusher, BJ Ojolari, this year. He tears his ACL in training camp has had injury issues. They have kind of been in a place where they're not willing to go out and spend or bring in some of those top options, versus more trying to bring in guys through the draft building for the future. And then when they know that they have a shot at being able to be that team, then being able to use some of that cash. I will say that one of the longtime Bills, I think, special teamers that you're able to see with the New England Patriots in Mac Wilson is going to actually play a decent role this year. Arizona's got 4 linebackers, but Mac Wilson is going to be rushing off of the edge. So that's something at least to look for. I think could be some potential A-gap and blitzes, or maybe even seeing just one Mike linebacker in the middle of the field with another safety coming up somewhat into coverage. That's something that I think when you're looking at how the Bills should want to play is you're going to want to target the guys up the middle, and Bilal Nichols, Roy Lopez, LJ Collier's coming off of an injury. They don't really have a true impact defensive lineman up there at the front because the guy they wanted to be that player is currently on IR for 4 games. That would be, I believe, the first round pick that they had in Robinson, who unfortunately did end up, he was looking great in camp, was having lots of issues, and Darius Robinson, I should say. And without him for the first 4 games at least, it's really going to probably be one of those areas where if the Bills are able to run the ball and the Cardinals keep the Cardinals offense off the field, it'll be a long day. I think the concern I would have would be for, if there is one for the Bills, if things mix up a bit, there's different coverage areas with a lot of the younger guys who are there and with some of the guys in Arizona safeties. The biggest concern I would have would be if Cardinals are able to get any sort of pressure whatsoever, or even able to kind of keep coverage for the most part back, where Josh Allen is just having to wait in the pocket and to keep disciplined in the run game. The worry I would have would be like a drop from the receiver or someone running the wrong route, or just something that hasn't necessarily gone right, I think, for the Bills with some of that inexperience that you're going to see. I also think that the Bills, as far as it goes with their deep threat, I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to try to take that away as best as they can. And with the 3 safety looks, I think it's going to really be on those guys knowing the underneath coverage and being able to excel for that. Because what you don't want to see is, all right, Cardinals are running the ball on us, they're putting people in the box, and we're not being able to threaten as much on them. Suddenly it turns into a place where you don't want to be the team giving up the big plays. And that's what I think Arizona on the offensive side will target. I know that it's going to be, at least starting in this game, the Bills have DeMar Hamlin, I know, is going to be a starting safety. And with Matt Milano out, the first thing that Cardinals fans thought was, wow, we've got 2 of our best receivers in Trey McBride and Greg Dortch, and they both are going to be lining up against like some of these guys in the safety. So it's really going to come down to seeing how your nickel corner will do, because that has a huge opportunity with Arizona's play action game and with Kyler Murray's escapability, very similar to Josh Allen, where being able to get out of the pocket and escape and being able to have the legs, if you don't account for them, that opens things up deep in the passing game. That's one of the areas I think that is very similar. If the Bills try to make the Cardinals one-dimensional, the hope is that your defensive lineman would be able to kind of get into Kyler Murray's face, keep him contained in a similar way, because with the weapons that they have now, the Cardinals at least will probably be able to take advantage of stuff over the middle just because McBride is so good of a player. And if that forces safeties into areas, if that means that there's extra coverage having to give into, or there's room up the middle, when you account for all of that, you take out Dortch, you take out some of the run game, you take out Trey McBride, that's going to leave Marvin Harrison Jr. up on the left side. And that's going to be one of those matchups. If what we've seen Kyler do with DeAndre Hopkins, that's been pretty deadly when you've got one of those guys lined up outside. And that's one of the cases where if I'm a Bills fan, that's where I'm expecting that if I can avoid a high scoring game, be able to comfortably win against Arizona, that's a great job. Well done. This Cardinals team, though, is very motivated as an underdog to try to prove that wrong. And I think that you could see some big plays potentially in the works because of just the way that the Bills secondary is currently lined up. And Arizona, even against good run defenses last year, was still productive. So I think that would be the spot that I'd worry about as a Bills fan, is over the middle of the field. You have to keep tight coverage, and then you've got to win that one-on-one matchup if you're not able to, because if Marvin Harrison Jr. is able to just exploit whatever corner where he's lined up on for the most part and get the one-on-one win, that's going to lead to some big plays, and that's going to lead to Arizona putting up some points onto what I think is a good Bills defense.
Yeah. I said I predicted the Bills to win the game this week, but I said it probably would have been a different story if we were playing halfway through the season or closer to the end of the season when Kyler and Marvin Harrison have a little bit more time to develop that relationship at real game speed, and kind of let Marvin Harrison get his feet wet in the NFL a little bit. I think it kind of benefits the Bills a little bit that it's going to be the first time that Marvin Harrison is playing in the NFL, and it's going to take him a couple games to get used to the speed and used to Kyler Murray and stuff like that. So I think we benefit a little bit, like you said, because that is a weakness for us on defense is our safeties and our corners. So I think that is a kind of a benefit for us that we might not get exposed as much had this been week 13 of the season, or even if it was next year kind of thing, and it's Marvin Harrison's second year in the league.
Right, and that's something that we'll have to see how that connection works. Arizona has been lining up Harrison Jr. in the slot in their practices as well, so that's one of the areas of when there's adjustments, you're going to use man coverage on him. If it goes into zone, he's been very slippery. One of the takeaways I had from seeing Harrison Jr. in camp was just how quickly he was able to change direction at his size, and that not only I think is separation, but where I think it could play a part is in the red zone. So inside of the red zone, you have Josh Allen and Kyler Murray both have legs. You've got some big targets in those tight ends. If it comes down to a receiving matchup, that's really where you're going to want Harrison Jr. and Keon Coleman to be able to shine. And that's something where at least I would say the Cardinals have an advantage on the one side there. They also have good run games. But if the Bills have a stouter run defense and they're able to stop that, and on their offensive side, kind of gash some of Arizona's front seven, that may be where the Bills have a little bit more of a shot. So I think that what we can at least expect from this game, however, is if both teams come to play, there will be points. There could be some turnovers that we see with some of the youth and inexperience for the most part. But I do think that most people are looking at this game and saying, as long as both teams at least aren't, sleeping through the through the first game of the or trying to get adjusted to everything, you're probably going to be looking at a game that's going to have quite a few points and maybe even some back and forth. Especially because we've gotten to the point now where people, I think, have forgotten that Kyler Murray has been a good quarterback who's been able to put up a lot of points in the past. One of the areas, obviously, we've seen from some of that, unfortunately, Buffalo fans remember because that highlight of the Hail Murray that they called it keeps playing all the time for the most part, at least, where I'm like, that only happened because our defense is completely blew a coverage, at least with 27 seconds left. So that's it's great that you can remember how high scoring that last game was. Yeah.
That's my main hope for week one is that we get revenge for the Hail Murray.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, what's your prediction? How do you see the game playing out? What do you think? Who wins the game?
Yeah, so I've got this as a pretty high-scoring game. I've got this one as a 36-34 Buffalo win with, I think it's the Tyler Bass being on that last-minute kick. I think that what we've seen, at least with Arizona, has been that they are that team that won't really go away. They just kind of will keep clawing at you and try to either find a way back in. So I think that there's a good chance that Arizona not playing some of their starters in preseason versus the Bills, a little bit slower start with some areas in the first half, and that I think that they're able to claw back at the end of the game to the point where it ends up actually becoming a tit-for-tat back and forth. I think at the end of the day, though, that Bills experience of Josh Allen being able to run the football will allow them to be able to take away with the win. But if the Cardinals are able to go in and knock off the Bills, then that's going to be a huge area, I think, for a lot of people to recognize that the team is starting to kind of put some of those pieces together. I do think that ultimately Arizona, this is kind of a lot of people have been already projecting that they could be in the hunt for a playoff spot or being able to at least put kind of a big step forward. I'm hesitant to kind of jump all the way there just yet. I think that it's like even calling it a 9-8 season, some fans wouldn't like it. Others, I think, like me, would say that that's a tremendous success. I think this would be a loss for Arizona, but if it's competitive and not just you lost by 3 touchdowns, but hey, it was close through the first half of the game. I think being able to have more of one of those chances to win it type of areas would be kind of at least an accomplishment for Arizona. But this is also the year of by the time we get rolling, there won't be any moral victories like there were for last year, which I know the team had one single victory through the first 8 games without Kyler. It was just against the Dallas Cowboys, which is one of the funniest, I think, stats on record is Cowboys haven't beat the Cardinals in like over a decade, which is one of the funniest, like, weird factoids that's out there. We'll see what goes on with the Cardinals and Bills, because this is definitely 2 teams that don't see each other often. And they're all at a very similar place right now, just at 2 very different intersection lines as far as how their success has gone over the past few years.
Yeah. Well, I think that I said on my show yesterday, you've kind of changed my mind through this episode on, because like I said, you don't hear much about Arizona, and I just think, how much is just adding Marvin Harrison going to change their team? But once you break down kind of more of their defensive options and kind of stuff like that, so I don't see it being as high of a scoring game as you have it. I think it's kind of more of like a maybe like a 24-14 game for the Bills, a touchdown and a field goal probably ahead or something like that. Maybe a 20-14 game kind of thing, something like that. But I think I just think that the Bills we're expected to win this game. If the Bills do end up losing this game, the Bills Twitter is going to go absolutely haywire. All the offseason talk about the Bills not being any good anymore is going to be, kind of confirmed amongst all the haters. But I think Arizona is probably a little bit better than most people are giving them credit for at this point in the offseason.
Yeah, I can say as a Cardinals fan, like, don't need to freak out Bills fans. Now, if the Cardinals steamroll the Bills for the most part, even sometimes maybe it's just a bad day at the office. It's interesting that you're taking the under as far as for that goes. I think right now the Bills are 6.5-point favorites. So even if Arizona is able to, like in my spot, I would have them covering the spread but losing the game. The over-under is set at 48.5 points, I think. So that's looking more of like a 28-21 sort of game for the most part, as far as with the point total.
I think it's going to take the Bills too long. I think it's going to take the Bills too long or more than this game to get like Keon Coleman involved. And I think we're just going to be a run heavy team at first to kind of just get everyone's feet wet with all the new players and all the new. It's Joe Brady's first time. We got a new defensive coordinator. We're just going to try and chew up as much of the clock as we can, kind of thing. I don't see us going out there and trying to score as much as we can.
Yeah, I think the one thing we can both agree on, though, is if you got Trey McBride and you invested that one, like, this is probably going to be a big week for him because of just the fact that we've been watching him in camp, and it's like, oh gosh, like, he's just catching like everything that's coming his way. He looks like he's like fully ready to go. That is one of those areas of, like you said, with Bills fans, like, Cardinals have some weapons now that they did not really have a year before. Like, Zach Ertz was catching passes in the start of the year for the most part. And I think that it would be one of those areas. It's not to say that the Bills have kind of gone bad if they lose or are not good anymore, but I think it would just be more of a sign that Arizona is just kind of ascending at least into some of that area, especially on the offensive side, and some of those matchups would just not be favoring Buffalo. On the other hand, you can look at Arizona with the 31st rushing offense. I think was it rushing defense last year. They finished 32nd, actually. Even with that 70-point game, the Broncos still were not the final ranked team. So that just kind of shows how low Arizona was. It's one of those places of, like they say, you get out and run the ball efficiently, be able to protect your quarterback through running the ball against a defense that doesn't have as many stars, do kind of your job on the other end. That's where it really kind of starts and ends. And hopefully these teams can keep out of the turnover battle for the most part. I think that would be the area that I would watch. Is if you've got some issues, it doesn't feel like that Kyler Murray is a guy who makes a lot of those kind of unforced errors. As far as in the last couple of years, he's just gotten a little bit more efficient with this scheme. Josh, as we know with Joe Brady, has been much more efficient. So it really could, like you said, fall on some of those young receivers making a mistake potentially, or a team just knocking the football loose for the most part to be able to get one of those game-changing sort of plays. I'm looking forward to this game, even if there's an average NFL fan just coming into it. I think that this is going to be a fun game to be able to watch, and it's one of those cases where it's a good way to kick off the season for both of these franchises.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and thank you so much for coming on. It was I know it was a last minute ordeal for you, so I really appreciate your time coming, and I'll end with Go Bills, and I'm sure you'll end with Go Birds. But yeah.
Also, you can just follow me, at least if you want any Cardinals takes at Blake Murphy 7 is the other spot. But I know with a lot of the Bills fans who are watching, like sometimes hopefully it'll just be we get together in a Super Bowl someday. Like that's the ultimate type of podcast that we're both wanting.
Goal.
That's what we're all rooting for here, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, man, and good luck on the season.
Yep. Take care, Ben.
Okay.
Good
Thanks.
to be on.
Okay. Bye.